Growing older is supposed to come with wisdom, peace, and more time to yourself, but no one tells you about the silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a room but creeps into your sense of purpose. No one tells you how strange it feels to outlive your best friends, or how a body you trusted for decades suddenly asks for permission to move. People prepare you for retirement, but not for the invisible weight that follows it. Not for the moment you walk into a room, speak, and realize no one heard you. Or worse, no one listened. This isn't about getting old. It's about what aging takes from you quietly. While everyone around you assumes you're fine. But you're not invisible. You're not done. And you're definitely not alone. This is the part of aging that no one talks about. And today, we're going to talk about it. 1. Losing your sense of purpose. After retirement or when children grow up, many older adults feel unneeded or adrift. The loss of routine and responsibility can lead to emotional restlessness and even depression. Rediscovering purpose through volunteering, mentoring, or small acts of service can restore meaning. What if the hardest part of getting older isn't the pain in your knees or the ache in your back, but something quieter, something invisible, something you don't even realize is weighing on you until you feel its absence like an echo in an empty room? What if the real challenge of aging is losing the very thing that once gave your life momentum, meaning, and morning routine, not because you failed or faded, but because life, in its inevitable reshaping, simply moved the goalposts? Because here's the truth no one prepares us for. The most disorienting part of growing older might not be what leaves your body, but what slowly slips from your calendar, your schedule, your identity, and that's your sense of purpose. Gone are the mornings filled with meetings, carpools, deadlines, phone calls, and tasks stacked on top of tasks. Gone are the days when someone needed you every hour, when your presence solved problems or held a family together. And now, even if you're surrounded by love, you may still find yourself lying in bed in the early morning light, wondering not just what to do with the day, but who you are without all those roles you once wore so effortlessly. Because aging doesn't just test the body, it tests identity, and when those familiar structures fall away, it leaves many people quietly drifting through days that are full of time but short on meaning. And while society celebrates retirement like a reward, what no one tells you is that for many, it feels more like exile. The truth is, we are wired to be needed, to feel useful, to know that we still make a difference in someone's day. And without that tether to contribution, it's easy to start feeling invisible even to yourself. I remember speaking with Walter, a 76-year-old man who had run a neighborhood hardware store for over 4 decades. He said that after he sold the shop, people stopped calling, neighbors stopped stopping by, and though he finally had all the time in the world, he found himself sitting on his front porch feeling irrelevant. He wasn't depressed exactly, but he felt like a character who had been written out of the story. And he wasn't alone, because for every Walter, there are thousands quietly grappling with this same shift, this same emptiness that no one quite warns you about. His turning point came when a local school asked if he'd teach basic woodworking once a week. He agreed, reluctantly, not knowing that those 30-minute sessions would reignite something he thought he'd lost forever, the joy of passing something on, of being looked to for answers, of being once again seen. And that's the key. It's not about going back to work. It's not about chasing productivity. It's about contribution. It's about recognizing that your purpose doesn't end when the job ends, or when the kids grow up, or when your spouse passes. It just changes shape. Maybe your new role isn't to lead but to listen, not to solve but to support. not to build but to bless purpose, can be found in mentoring, in nurturing a garden, in being the voice of calm and wisdom for a friend going through chaos. It can be found in writing down your life story, in teaching a grandchild how to cook, in simply showing up for someone consistently when the rest of the world forgets to call. But we must name this loss if we're going to navigate it, because too many older adults suffer in silence, telling themselves they should feel grateful for the rest when what they really feel is disconnected, telling themselves they should be content, when really they're aching for relevance. When we pretend that purpose is only for the young, we rob the world of the depth and clarity that only lived experience can offer. So if you've felt yourself drifting, if your days feel long but light on meaning, if you're not sure who you are without someone to serve, know that you're not broken. And you're not alone. You're just in a quiet in-between, and this season, like all seasons, carries its own kind of purpose. You just have to look for it in new places, in smaller acts, and sometimes in the people who are still learning what you already know. 2. Watching friends and loved ones pass away. One of the most painful realities is the gradual loss of peers, spouses, and longtime friends. This grief isn't always loud. It often shows up as quiet emptiness or longing. Remembering and honoring loved ones through stories, traditions, and values keeps them present. It doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks in slowly, gently, like autumn leaves falling from trees you thought would stay green forever. One day, it's a friend who doesn't return your call. Then it's a birthday where fewer people gather, then a funeral, then another, and before you can fully catch your breath, the table that once overflowed with laughter and shared stories is missing half the chairs. And that's when you realize that one of the hardest, most painful parts of getting older isn't what's happening to your body, it's what's happening to your circle. You start to outlive people. And while no one talks about that out loud, it changes you in ways that go far deeper than sadness. It changes how memory lives inside you, how conversation feels without the people who used to know your full story, how quiet the world becomes even when it's full of sound. This kind of grief isn't loud. It doesn't scream or demand to be seen. It lives in the soft moments, when you instinctively reach for your phone to call someone who's gone. When you tell a joke that no one understands because the only person who laughed at it isn't here anymore. When you sit in a familiar place and feel like a stranger in your own life, not because you've changed, but because the people who mirrored your identity, who carried pieces of your past, are no longer here to reflect it back to you. Take Evelyn, 84, who once had weekly coffee dates with her husband, 2 sisters, and her best friend from church. She told me those mornings were her anchor, her rhythm, but over the course of 10 years, she lost every one of them to illness or age. And while she still goes to the same diner, still orders the same coffee, she says, "The silence follows me." It's not that she's completely alone. It's that the people who made her feel most known are no longer here, and without them, it's not just loneliness she feels, it's the slow erosion of identity. Like looking in a mirror and not fully recognizing the reflection, because so much of who she was lived in the people who are now gone. And this is something no one prepares you for. The gradual hollowing of a shared life, the way you carry entire histories alone, without anyone left to remind you of the time you were young, impulsive, radiant. Bold, the way inside jokes lose their punchline when only one person remains to remember them. Grief in old age is not just about mourning the dead. It's about mourning the shrinking of shared memory, the slow fading of the cast of characters who made your life feel like a story worth telling. And yet, The world around you keeps moving, young people rise, conversations shift, culture evolves. And suddenly your memories start to feel like artifacts precious. Yes, but distant, dismissed, politely forgotten. And while family may check in, and caregivers may be kind, they can't replace the friends who saw you through divorces, births, breakdowns, rebuildings. They can't replace the friend who always knew what your silence meant, or the sibling who remembered your childhood from the same angle, because those people didn't just know you. They understood you, and when they're gone, the grief you carry isn't just for them, it's for the version of you that only they truly saw. And it's in those moments that many seniors begin to feel untethered, not only grieving who they've lost, but questioning who they still are. And yet, even in that grief, there is power, because memory, though painful, is also sacred. Those stories, those names, those inside jokes, they live on when you speak them, when you write them down, when you pass them forward like gifts to those who never got to meet the people who shaped you. You become the keeper of legacy, the witness to a world that once was, and in that witnessing, you give your past a present place to live. So if you found yourself reaching for names that no longer answer, if certain days feel heavier and you're not quite sure why, if the silence around you feels like a shadow rather than a rest, know this: you are not broken, and you are not alone. You are carrying a kind of love so deep that even death couldn't end it. And that love hurts sometimes because it matters. And while the grief may never leave completely, neither will the people you've lost not. If you continue to speak their names, honor their stories, and keep showing up in a world they once helped you build. 3. Feeling invisible in society. Older adults are often overlooked or underestimated in public and social spaces. This subtle invisibility erodes dignity, self-worth, and confidence. Reclaiming presence through storytelling, advocacy, and intergenerational connection reaffirms value. There's a moment, a slow, almost imperceptible shift when you realize that the world no longer sees you the way it once did. Not with cruelty, not with hatred, but with absence, a kind of looking past instead of looking at. And suddenly you're not being spoken to directly at the checkout line. The nurse in the clinic talks to your adult daughter instead of you. The waiter addresses your younger companion, even though you're the one paying. And it's not that anyone's trying to be disrespectful, it's that they've stopped remembering that you're still here. Still sharp, still feeling, still present. And that invisibility, while subtle, is one of the most devastating experiences of aging, because it doesn't scream, it accumulates in polite dismissal, in rushed conversations, in assumptions about your ability, your relevance, your understanding of the world. And it's not just in public, it's in the stories we tell, the media we consume, the values our culture elevates. Youth is praised, beauty is filtered, speed is rewarded, and wisdom, patience, lived experience, the quiet dignity of aging with grace, those things are treated like museum pieces, admired from a distance but not engaged in daily life. And for the older adult, who once was at the center of family decisions, workplace strategy, and community life, that shift feels like a slow erasure, not just of role, but of identity. And what hurts most is not the loud moments of exclusion, but the 100 little signs each week that tell you, you've had your turn, step aside. Let me tell you about Henry, 80 years old. A retired teacher with a memory like a steel trap and a laugh that could still shake a room. He used to go to the same coffee shop every Saturday with his grandson. He'd order the drinks, pay at the counter, and yet week after week, the barista would smile politely and turn to his grandson for confirmation. Is that what he wants? Henry said at first he laughed it off, chalked it up to manners, but over time, he just stopped going, not because he wasn't capable, but because he got tired of explaining that he was still here, still making his own choices, still deserving of direct attention. And what broke him wasn't the interaction itself, but the implication that he had quietly slipped out of relevance without anyone noticing. And Henry's story is not rare. It's echoed in senior centers, church pews, family gatherings, where older adults are interrupted mid-sentence, talked over during decisions, or treated with patronizing kindness that feels more like handling than honoring. And while people may mean well, their failure to see the person behind the age creates a wound that goes unnamed, a slow loss of social weight that eats away at confidence, at identity, at joy. Because to be seen is not about vanity, it's about dignity, it's about having your thoughts, your preferences, your presence acknowledged as valid, not out of pity, not out of politeness, but because you're a full human being with history, insight, and worth. And when that recognition disappears, even the most resilient people begin to withdraw, not because they lack strength, but because showing up to a world that no longer listens is exhausting. And the most painful part is that this invisibility often hides behind courtesy. People call you dear or sweetheart instead of your name. They speak slower without asking if you need it. They assume you're out of touch without learning what you've lived through, and each of those tiny slights, though unspoken, tells you that your edges have been softened, your voice lowered, your space quietly reduced. But here's the truth. Invisibility is not a condition of age, it's a condition of how society chooses to engage. And while the world may not change overnight, your presence still carries power whether you speak in a meeting, ask a question at the doctor's office, tell your story to a grandchild, or simply walk into a room with your head high and your words measured. You are resisting that slow fade. You are reminding others that aging doesn't erase your value, it reveals it. Your life has been 1,000 books of decisions, victories, heartbreaks, recoveries, insights, and grace, and there's nothing passive about carrying that legacy forward into the spaces you still occupy. So if you've ever felt that strange sensation of being looked past, if you've started to question whether your thoughts matter, if you found yourself going quiet even when you have something to say, remember this: your voice is not a relic, it's a resource, and someone, somewhere needs to hear it. So speak anyway. Show up anyway, and let the world relearn how to see you, not as someone who used to matter, but as someone who still does. 4. Physical decline that limits freedom. Losing strength, balance, or stamina forces many to give up beloved activities and independence. This change can trigger frustration, shame, and grief. Adaptation, not denial, is the key. Using tools, pacing wisely, and redefining identity with compassion. There comes a day not marked by pain but by hesitation, when you reach for the staircase rail without thinking, or sit down more carefully than you used to, or stop halfway through tying your shoes because your back stiffens and you realize something's changed. Not drastically, not overnight, but subtly, steadily, because one of the hardest parts of growing older is not just what happens to your body, it's what happens to your relationship with your body, the silent renegotiation between who you were and who you are now, the realization that strength, speed, and stamina are no longer constants but variables, and that even small daily tasks now require planning, caution, and grace. It's not just the physical limitations, it's what they symbolize, the act of needing help to open a jar, when your hands used to be tools of creation. The frustration of forgetting why you walked into a room, The moment you sit in the car and hesitate, wondering if you can still drive comfortably at night, these aren't just inconveniences. They're tiny confrontations with mortality. Reminders. That time is not a gentle visitor, but a sculptor, reshaping the way you move, the way you stand, the way you rest. And what hurts most isn't always the pain, it's the loss of spontaneity, the need to think about things that used to be automatic, and the quiet grief of giving up activities that once made you feel alive. Let me tell you about Maria, 79, who used to dance every Saturday at her community center. Nothing formal, just salsa and old swing tunes she remembered from her youth, until one day, her knee gave out during a spin, and though the injury wasn't severe, something shifted. She told me she still hears the music, still feels the rhythm in her soul. But now she sits and taps her feet instead of standing and moving. And the hardest part, she said, wasn't the injury, it was standing by the wall while everyone else danced, and trying to convince herself she still belonged in the room. Because that's the deeper layer. Physical decline doesn't just limit your movement, it narrows your spaces, your social circles, your sense of belonging. And when that loss isn't acknowledged, it starts to feel like shame, as if you've somehow failed by aging, as if needing a cane or resting more often or saying no to an invitation means you're less than who you used to be. But here's the truth that no one says out loud. Adaptation is not surrender, it's resilience in disguise, and every adjustment you make to stay engaged, safe, and centered is a testament to your wisdom, not your weakness. And yet, so many people resist the tools that would help them. Mobility aids, hearing devices, vision support, not because they don't work, but because using them feels like admitting defeat. But what if we saw it differently? What if using a walker wasn't giving in, but reclaiming freedom to move through the world without fear? What if pacing yourself wasn't slowing down, but preserving energy for what truly matters? What if asking for help wasn't weakness, but a quiet act of trust? Because aging is not a battle to be won, it's a rhythm to be danced with. And yes, the tempo slows, the steps change, but the music doesn't stop. It simply shifts into something deeper, more intentional, more rooted. And while your body may not be what it once was, your presence, your insight, your compassion have only grown richer, and that richness deserves to be lived. Even if it means sitting out the spin to keep your balance for the next song. So if you've felt the sting of giving something up, if you've noticed your pace change or your body betray you in small, unexpected ways, don't shrink. Breathe and know that you are not falling apart. You are adapting, surviving, continuing, and there is no shame in that, only strength. 5. Fear of being a burden. Many seniors fear asking for help, believing it imposes on loved ones. This fear is tied to pride and past roles as caregivers. Open communication and reframing the value of presence, love, and wisdom can ease this burden. It's the hesitation before you ask, the pause before you call, the voice inside that says, "They're busy. Don't bother them." It's the way you downplay your discomfort. Pretend you didn't need that ride. Brush off your forgetfulness as nothing. It's not pride exactly, it's something more painful, more tender, the fear of being a burden. And if there is one feeling that quietly haunts many older adults, it's that, the worry that your needs, your slowness, your repetition, your vulnerability might become an inconvenience to those you love, most not because they said it, but because the world has a way of making dependence look like failure, and independence look like dignity. And so you begin to pull back, not because you want to, but because you've internalized the message that asking for help means becoming less. It's in the way caregivers are praised for patience while those needing care are pitied. It's in the subtle discomfort when someone has to repeat themselves for you, or wait while you find your words, and over time, you start to shrink your requests. You hold your struggles quietly, smile through your pain, and convince yourself that staying silent is how you love your family best, but deep down, it's not love, it's fear of being too much, of overstaying, of losing the respect you spent a lifetime earning. I remember Ben, a 72-year-old widower with early signs of Parkinson's. He lived alone, managed most things himself, but on rough days he needed help with groceries or bills his daughter visited weekly. Always happy to assist, but Ben hated asking. He told me, "She's got a job, a family, her own stress. I don't want to weigh her down." And so he stopped calling unless it was urgent. But one day, his daughter found a stack of unpaid bills and spoiled food in the fridge, not because he couldn't afford help, but because he couldn't bring himself to ask. And when she asked him why, his eyes welled up and he whispered, "I don't want to be her chore." That line stuck with me because for so many seniors, that's the silent battle, not just with illness or limitation, but with the story they tell themselves about their worth, that to be helped is to be a burden, that needing support means becoming less. But here's the truth that rarely gets said out loud. You are not a chore. You are not an obligation. You are a person who has spent decades showing up for others. And now, in this chapter, you're being given the chance to allow others to show up for you. And that's not weakness. That's reciprocity. That's grace. Because asking for help isn't about surrendering your value. It's about trusting that your presence is more important than your performance. It's about recognizing that love is not a one-way street, and that those who care for you aren't tallying your usefulness. They're honoring your story, and what a tragedy it would be if you robbed them of that chance, just to protect their time. Because the truth is, being needed isn't what gives you worth, it's being real. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say, "I need you," and let them answer, not out of duty, but out of devotion. And if you're someone who has always been strong, always been the fixer, the provider, the one others leaned on, it may feel impossible to flip that script. But hear this. Your strength didn't vanish, it just shifted forms, and now it lives in your honesty, in your trust, in your willingness to let someone else carry part of your load. And by doing that, you're not taking something away, you're giving them something precious, the chance to love you, not just admire you. So if you've ever stayed silent out of fear, if you've swallowed your needs to keep from inconveniencing someone, if you've told yourself, "I'll manage," even when you're clearly struggling, pause, breathe, and know this: you are allowed to need help. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be cared for. And that care doesn't diminish you, it dignifies you.